Good afternoon, music world. John here from What's Spinning. We're here today to rank another artist's discography. I had mentioned a few weeks ago I'm going to be trying to do 2 of these a month. One of these will usually coincide with an album that's coming out, a new album that's coming out in a artist's discography, so to speak, and the other will usually be an artist either that, I've been familiar with or, more importantly, something that you guys want me to check out. Like, I've seen some really awesome ideas so far, like The Clash and The Drones. But today, I'm here to chat about the legendary discography, the crystal clear discography of one of alternative rock's most iconic acts, and that is Radiohead. Now, this may come as a surprise to y'all, but it took me many years to get into Radiohead. I don't think I got into them until my early 20s. And even when I did at first, I loved certain things from them, but I really also didn't care for a lot of other albums. And then one day, things just kind of clicked, and Radiohead became one of the most important bands in the world to me. And I'm sure a lot of people have very similar stories. So today, I am here for 2 reasons. One, because I want to rank their 9 studio albums from my least favorite to my favorite, and most importantly, probably break a few hearts along the way. As always, this is all opinion, so let's just have some fun. And at 9, I am probably not going to shock a lot of people by putting Pablo Honey here. I've never been that enamored with this record either, sadly. I mean, compared to some of the band's later work that maybe I'm not as enamored with, this album doesn't sound like a Radiohead record. As a matter of fact, the band, when they were recording Pablo Honey, tends to me sound like they knew what the hell they were doing. There are nods to grunge and modern alternative rock, as well as some Britpop thrown in as well, but none of it really seems like it has much of a clear direction on this record. The production is not exactly the most pleasing thing, and there's some great cuts. I mean, Creep is a classic for a reason, and tracks like How Do You, I think are genuinely great Radiohead deep cuts, but this to me is very clearly Radiohead trying to find themselves and kind of stumbling at first, and that's why I'm putting it at 9. I'm not the biggest fan of it either. As a matter of fact, I'm not really that keen on the number 8 album on this list as well, and that would be The King of Limbs. As a matter of fact, I came very, very close to putting this at 9. I mean, this is just such a weird album on so many levels. I mean, when you break it down, there's a lot going on here. It's a very weird, very fuzzy, very heady record that seemingly has something going on at every moment, but I still, after all these years, cannot remember any of it. Radiohead's ideas here sound like an afterthought, and for a band that's usually, mastered the art of production, the production here is very forgettable, honestly. A lot of this record I don't have anything bad to say about, and that alone is criminal for a Radiohead album. I'm not a big fan of it either. Now, at number 7, gonna put an album that's certainly not bad, but always been a little bit more middle of the road for me, and that is going to be Hail to the Thief. Now, this one for me, this is one of the most polarizing records in Radiohead's discography, I feel like. I feel like every single person I've ever talked to about this album either absolutely loves it to the point where it's their favorite thing that Radiohead has ever done, or they just don't like it outright. And honestly, my thoughts on the record are just as puzzling. There'll be times where I'll go 2 or 3 years without listening to this thing, and I'll re-listen to it, and I'll fall in love with it all over again. But then, after a month or 2, I will be kind of ready to put it on the back burner for a few years. It's a frustrating record because there is a lot of great material here. I mean, There alone is one of the most iconic Radiohead singles ever. It's a rare, inconsistent record from one of alternative rock's finest. The good is great, but the bad is really forgettable. At number 6, I'm going to put Amnesiac because I've always had a soft spot for this record. I am a big Kid A fan, and this was recorded around the same time as Kid A, as apparently was supposed to be a completely different record. But honestly, I've always had a soft spot for it. The atmosphere, the songwriting, it's very much along the same lines as Kid A. It's cold and it's completely alien sounding, even though it was released like a year after. What it really comes down to is consistency, and that's why this isn't a little bit higher in my countdown here. As a matter of fact, a lot of this record is fantastic work. I've always thought that Pyramid Song, if it's not my favorite Radiohead track, it's probably a very close second. Also, Knives Out was the first Radiohead track I was ever introduced to years ago, but God, the second half of this record really has lessened on me over the years, and it really is very spotty. At number 5, I'm going to put In Rainbows. Now, this may come as a bit of a surprise to y'all. There were a bulk of years where I just kind of didn't care about In Rainbows. When it came out, I think my initial thoughts were it's absolutely gorgeous, but it's also a little one note. And I still do feel like that with some of the later cuts on this record, but yeah, this thing has grown on me a lot over the years, especially because of, just like I said, how beautiful it gets at points. There's also some angsty krautrock style tracks like Body Snatchers that are real standouts. It's a little hard to classify and a little formless at times, but I do get the hype. It is a pretty fantastic record. At number 4, I am going to put a Moon-Shaped Pool. Back in 2016, when this album dropped, it was my runner-up for Album of the Year, and it was a very close second. And honestly, I feel like my thoughts haven't changed that much. I called it one of Radiohead's biggest triumphs, and I stand by it. This is such a chilly, telling, haunted album. Somehow the most chilly and telling in their discography. There's also a lot of krautrock influences, chamber pop influences. Ambient and more make up this completely bleak, hopeless, very monochromatic work. I mean, True Love waits the hit. We waited so many years for it, and it still sounds fantastic. And Burn the Witch still gives me the chills. Now, this may come as a surprise to y'all, but at number 3, I'm putting The Bends. This is a personal favorite of mine, and it is the first Radiohead album I ever listened to. And yeah, it is just so good. I mean, it is so raw. It is so punchy. I mean, take the styles, the clashing styles of Pablo Honey, but have them actually sound good, and you have a record like this. Much like that album as well, we got all the different flavors on here. We got nods to grunge on the title track. We got nods to Britpop on High and Dry. I mean, from this time period, 1995, I feel like a lot of records that came out around this time, I just don't care about anymore, but this still sounds somehow fresh to me overall after all these years. It's so good, and Fake Plastic Trees and Street Spirit Fade Out are two of my favorite Radiohead tracks of all time. And at number 2, I'm gonna put Okay Computer. Don't yell at me. I mean, really, don't at me, bro. I mean, this album is damn near perfect. Everything about this record is completely wild to me. And I mean, it was almost released 30 years ago, but it still sounds completely ahead of its time. The production on this thing is immaculate. And if you really think about it, 3 albums in, and Radiohead had already transcended the alternative rock label. And you once again get a lot here between the twisted, wailing guitars of Paranoid Android, the gorgeous letdown and exit music for a film. Also, Karma Police is on here. It truly is like a once-in-a-lifetime record, and it's one that we wouldn't be here today without. It's truly a classic and a near-perfect album, and one of the greatest records of all time. But for me, and my personal taste, my favorite Radiohead record is most indeed Kid A. And let me start out by saying, without OK Computer, there is no Kid A. And I respect that, and I'll be the first one to admit it, but for me, Kid A is special. Not only is this my favorite Radiohead record, this is probably one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. With OK Computer, Radiohead instilled this fear of a technologically fueled future, but with Kid A, that future comes to fruition. And at times it sounds gloomy and desolate and like all hope is gone, but it also sounds really gorgeous at times and textured and colorful. Much like OK Computer did in the 90s, Kid A in the 2000s ushered in a new generation of music. And if you think about it, it's easily one of the biggest gambles done in alternative rock history. Yet somehow, once again, less than a couple of years later, after OK Computer, they truly ascended the genre once again, and I think it's perfect. I genuinely struggle to find anything that I don't hate about the album, and I've said it before, and I will say it again so many times. How to Disappear Completely is my favorite Radiohead track, but let me know what you all guys think. Let me know y'all's rating down below, and remember, as always, this is all just opinion, so let's have some fun. Until next time, have a great day, friends.